Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. This video is going to be short. I'm going to talk about some of the things I've highlighted on the timeline, and it has to do with sexual control and Santa Cruz, sexual control in terms of the state. First, I'm going to give you two statements. One of them is clearly true. The other one, I want you to think about it and decide whether it's true or not. Their biggest failure as individuals and groups, including their ancestors, is persecuting. So what is left of their intelligence test? Well, what's left is figuring out if they stop and when, and if they compensate me. Okay, that's what's left. They failed to be smart, they failed to be wise, their groups have failed, as individuals they failed. So what's left is, are they going to stop and when? If they do stop, that is, and if they compensate me. Oh, that's part of the first statement, right? So it goes like this: the biggest failure of them as individuals and groups, including their ancestors, is persecuting me. What is left of their intelligence test is if they stop and when, and if they compensate me. So we'll make that the statement there. Statement 2. Their offspring will be walking corpses. They are animated by deception. Now I want you to understand why they bent over backwards to keep me out of Santa Cruz to the degree that they did, and why the females I dated in Santa Cruz, when Santa Cruz is probably less than 1% black or so, something like that, why they were all black or mixed black. Right? There was one who was black and Mongolian. I wasn't very into her. There was one who was black and Filipina, one who was black and Hispanic, and one who was black. Those are the females I dated from Santa Cruz, and that is outrageous. I'm somebody who grew up preferring women who are other races, frankly. No offense to anybody. And that's how it played out. And for a time, they worked with society and my parents to keep me out of Santa Cruz in my early 20s. And that's a story for another day. It's in my story playlist, okay, on my Persecuted by Racist channel. Okay, so let me talk about some of these things that I've highlighted here. When I was around 3 years old or something at Montessori preschool, there were people who were from military families and their friends who tried to team up with my brother and I, and, I used to wrestle them and so on and so forth, and I had some triumphs there. Okay, going on into when I was 11 years old, when I went to Bellarmine Summer School. I went to summer school for many years when I was in grade school and junior high, which overkills my kind of disdain for the school system. I've seen it in various ways. I went to various high schools. I know for sure, okay, that the school system is a catastrophic failure. Anyway, so I hung out with a gentleman who was from Newark, in California, and there were some other guys there, Kellen, Darnell, and Trent, and there was some clashing there that took place, and it has something to do with the PSYOP. So I grew up wrestling a lot of people. When I was in like 6th grade or something, there's this kid named Lincoln who was like, he was like 14 or 15 when I was, maybe 12. And he was a huge, huge white guy, knucklehead. This before I did martial arts, what have you, but I could wrestle well. But he was like damn near a grown man. He was like 6'4" in 6th grade. I have a picture of him at my house, and maybe I'll put it up later, so in a different video, but I want to get this video uploaded today. There was also Carlos at San Jose State Summer School, who was like 17 years old when I was 12. That's probably around the same time. So he confronted. So Lincoln, he kind of wrestled me down. One time he outran me. Like usually he wouldn't come in that well in the PE class with runnings, but he actually outran me, caught up to me, wrestled me down. I'm saying, hey, let me go, or else we're both going to get in trouble. He was such a knucklehead. He didn't. The police, not the police, the teachers come and we go to the office. So the next year, we see the Carlos. Okay, he's like he was like 17 because it was a math class, right, for people who were anyone who was ready for Algebra 1 or whatever. So this guy's in high school, and he's trying to get his credits for high school, or he's trying to get ahead I don't quite remember that part, but there was these high school kids that went there. And so he's like 17 years old. I'm like 12 years old. And he confronts me and like grabs my desk and moves it and starts, I forgot what it was about, but it wasn't about anything deep or anything that gave him a good excuse. I remember that, but I don't remember exactly what it was about. And he's like, confronting while I'm sitting down. And I'm like, I didn't think that he was a lot tougher than me, but I thought that at the time I'm a little kid, right? And he's like damn near an adult, okay? Then it wasn't a good idea to fight with him, and I didn't want to get in trouble with my parents too, so there was that. So going into, and this is part of their SOP, right? These guys are part of the military industrial complex's extended network, right? So those are military families. Lincoln was a very military themed guy. He had black military boots that he'd wear. Okay, he was fucked in the head. He was a military enthusiast in junior high. Okay, now, and Carlos came off like somebody who's affiliated with military guys. So sometimes people and he was like a gang member, right? But there one with more of a military kind of theme. So then, by the time, I don't want to make this video too long. Let's just wrap this up quickly here. So keep in mind that what comes to mind is the gays used to sing the Macho Man song, right? Because they're playing these guys out, right? Lincoln's a weirdo. No offense to him. Carlos is they're both a bit of clowns, right? But they're both like serious clowns. Is a simple way to explain it, right? They're fucked in the head. And so they're under the gay tutelage when I'm emerging as a very righteous person. So when we get to, which goes back to virtue means man, right? I'm the man. They're just some knucklehead guys who are trying to bully me, but I'm shaking it off because I'm a very tough, righteous person. So by the time I'm like 14 or 15, I'm in a boarding school in Southern California called Webb, and even Webb, there's a famous Satanist named Webb. I don't remember what his first name is, like Gary or something. Okay, if I'm not mistaken here. And so I'm in a group there. The gang members confront me again. They're older gang members. There's like 20 of them, and three or four of them break off from the group, and they confront me and my friend Terry. Okay, and so we kind of eventually form a group there, where we cut into our arms the letters SIC, which is a play on words for seek and cause and sick, right? Hell and L, right? But we're not, we defined at the time as strictly insane crew. Okay, strangely enough, it came out as sick. And I think that I think he came up with the idea, and I don't think they put him up to it. I think they might have put in his head with technology, I don't know, but it's very suspicious as it sets the stage for people to pretend that I'm crazy or something, right? And that's when, during summer school, there was a turning point where I got a bad grade on a test, and I told my dad I had spaced out to avoid getting in trouble, something I've corrected him about many times over the years, but he still used to cite that story as, hey, there's something wrong with you. And eventually some people many mental health people have said, they looked at my case and said there's nothing wrong with me. Okay, so there's some kind of controversy in mental health. Just like there's a controversy over the lack of a valid diagnostic test for mental illness. So anyway, and of course, obviously, you see that there's nothing wrong with me. I'm very coherent, very logic, and make a very clear and cogent argument in regards to these things. So when I get back to, unincorporated Morgan Hill, I form a group within a few years of that where it's UCC. Notice they both end in a C. And we changed the last C from click to crip at one point because I pushed for it. Okay, and that overkills that kind of belief that I should, at that time as a teenager, that I should be a gangster. A belief that doesn't kind of fully leave me until 2015. However, I always saw myself as a revolutionary, right? Crip meaning Christ rest in peace, community revolutionary in progress. Community revolution in progress. And I kind of took that angle. And I learned early on, and I knew early on, without being confronted by knuckleheads, that being a knucklehead is stupid. That selling drugs to your own people is, hard drugs is stupid, and so on and so forth. So there's a great many things I disagree with about people, and I pushed hard for women to avoid being raped, and I told them, what they should do, and so on and so forth, since I was like 13 years old. Anyway, so talking to people of various ages and what have you. Okay, so there's the use. Okay, so by 1997, I become a Taekwondo grand champion. And it's during taking Taekwondo that Kyle, who's older than I was, right? I was like, I'm 16, he was about 19, and he slaps me from behind. I turn around, and they do something that they've done more than once, which is sap my strength. So they thought that they were doing something. Going back to virtue means man. I had and have the highest cause, universal pinpoint and moral precision. When one does not have the highest cause, they are just a brute. I could have been one too, but I transcended, meaning I could have focused on lifting weights and being a knucklehead and trying to be a boxer instead of striking surgically, at world record speed, which is the archetype of Pharaoh. Right? Horus is the archetype of Pharaoh, the martial arts who strikes surgically, the falcon versus Set, who's associated with brute force and evil and the emptiness of evil, the desert, the desolate emptiness of evil versus the plush, life-filled wisdom of being righteous and preferring being a surgically striking warrior. Now, if you can't strike surgically because you have some condition, that doesn't mean you should be a Setian, okay? Or that you're just a big, strong guy, naturally have trouble coordinating. You should still obey God through me, right? Because the spirit is everything. The flesh isn't so important. I'm going over time here, so let's just move more quickly here. So, attractive females in general, especially white females, would come from out of town and go to Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. And there is historically a major effort in terms of the economy in general to keep people who are poor from going to nicer places, though people who are poor did go there, mind you. But if you look at the exact dynamic, say white people were, say, I don't know, 69% of America at the time. Maybe the beach was 80% white. I could be wrong about this, but when I was there, that's how it came off. White people everywhere. A little bit less minorities than there were in society at large. And the theme of Santa Cruz is kind of white, but it's still the major beach there. Okay? Now, why is this? If it was a completely harmless reason, I wouldn't care so much. The reason is that attractive females in general, especially white females, come from out of town and they go to Santa Cruz. Now, if you live in LA, you might say that the mall is a place where people recruit, pick up women more than the beach or the club. When you're in Northern California, in the San Jose and Santa Cruz area, Santa Clara County and Santa Cruz County, you're more likely to feel comfortable approaching a female at the beach. You probably meet females through parties and through school and through social media, but historically, before people were on social media so much, you probably think of Santa Cruz as the place you would get a chick. In fact, we'd go looking for females in Santa Cruz, not just the beach in general, because of the kind of extroverted theme of the town, the kind of, you might say, welcoming. It's there's haters there, that's for sure, but it's very important to note, maybe you should write this down to understand this, that in LA you get people who are more likely to hit on strangers, and females have an understanding of that. In San Jose, Morgan Hill, Gilroy, Milpitas, they think you're weird if you do that. In Santa Cruz, they're more likely to say, hey, what's up? In San Jose, like, oh, more likely like, why are you talking to me, kind of thing. Even at the mall, and it's more than just, if you're a stranger in general, like you can meet somebody on the social media and they could like you, but if you met the same person at the mall, they would probably give you the cold shoulder because there's like an air of trying to be cool. Okay, some people do pick up people at the mall, mind you, but it's to a lot less of a degree. Where if you're in LA, right, Crenshaw, Sunset Boulevard, so on and so forth, and you're popping your car, they expect it. That's what people do in LA. That's not so much what people do in Morgan Hill, Gilroy, and San Jose. They do it to some degree, but they don't do it to that degree. In Oakland, they do it to a larger degree. In Berkeley, I'd imagine they do it to a large degree. Not so much San Jose and the areas that are immediately surrounding Santa Cruz. Okay, other than, Capitola, other than the town Santa Cruz extends into. So, for example, Watsonville, perhaps. For example, Scotts Valley, right? As you go away from Santa Cruz to all the small towns, you go to San Jose, for example, on the 17, there is a lot less of that. And so when these white supremacists, and there's white supremacist hate groups that live in Scotts Valley and in Santa Cruz to some degree, and there's rich white people and Jews and LGBT who social engineer, when they see that dynamic, they say, uh-oh, we don't want these rich white girls from Palo Alto and Los Gatos and Saratoga and Sunnyvale and Santa Clara to go to Santa Cruz and meet some guy from East San Jose or, what have you. Okay, they want to keep the races separate to some degree. And they want white chicks who, the token minority, the white chick who's attractive to date a white guy or something, and to not date um, a black guy. Okay, for example. Now, it's not entirely that simple, but there's so much truth to it that you should know what I'm saying. So it doesn't play out one to one, but they're trying to unfairly give themselves the upper hand. It's the same reason why 9 million people starve to death a year. It's this drastic effort to give themselves a little bit of the upper hand, because in the bigger picture, the idea is it plays out a certain way, and that has to do with order, right? Law and order, the police, military, and fall in line, soldier, that kind of mentality. And it first and foremost is in the governing class and social clubs. That's why they allow that sentiment and those behaviors and those beliefs to be in the military and the police and the various contract groups and so on and so forth. Okay. So eventually there's the police dispatcher. I dated a daughter of a police dispatcher. So there's these various military people who are confronting me. And during that time, I'm dating the daughter of a police dispatcher, give or take around that time. Actually, no, it was actually a couple years later. There was this Hispanic military guy who showed up at my house when I was skinny, not in good shape. There was like 3 of them there. They were there to see somebody else on the property at the time. And this guy was like staring at me for no reason. I'm like, what the hell? Doesn't this guy know I can just go out there and shoot him or something? Like, what's he doing? I'm like, look at him. Like, but at the same time, I decided to cut it a pass, right? Because there's various ways I could handle it. I could went to my dad and say, hey, this guy's over there staring at me. What the hell, right? This is property, right? I could go, try to get a firearm, go out there. There's ways I could have solved it. But I'm sitting there like shocked and like skinny, and they're hitting me with technologies. I'm just tripping off the whole thing, right? He kind of turns his head to the side. I'm like, why the hell does he have a problem with me? And he looked like somebody I was in Santa Cruz County with, but it wasn't him, right? It was they do the familiar faces psyop, okay? And then around that time, I'm guessing it was before that, there was this Daryl guy who was military shaped, and I seen him again after that with a military looking guy, and they were trying to set me up and what have you, and my someone I know eventually gets in a fight with them, and they kind of break even. I told that story on my playlist or whatever. Okay, so eventually I start dating a female from I meet my ex-fiance, what have you, long distance relationship. Moving on to 2009, when I start my Illuminati Part 1 series. So I buy a bunch of swords on the internet around the time I start to make my videos on the internet, and I start doing martial arts again in 2009 or 2010. And I go back to college in 2010, and because of all the stuff that was going on, and the program that I was in was a little longer than 4 years, okay, and I started like halfway through 2010 or so. I graduated somewhere around early 2015 or something. Okay, because it was over a 4-year program. To make a long story short, it was an IT program, which is the most difficult degree to get there. Okay, and significantly so, So you can get a psychology degree, criminal justice, business, what have you, and they're all easier to get than an information technology degree. And again, I all but abandoned my studies in that regard after I got the degree, right? So it's just a bachelor's degree. So, and again, intelligence is not proven by mere book smarts, right, or whatever. I'm very, very book smart. I'm insightful. I'm much more book smart than other people because of the logic. Okay, but they scrambled to kind of keep me from doing a good job there in school in general. And often in times in my life, I got bad grades, and there was a SOP run on me. I'm being covertly drugged and so on and so forth. My whole life, to some degree. Okay, so in 2011, my uncle passes away, and 2010, on the first anniversary of his death, the police work with the PSYOP guys, and they set me up, okay? And I get detained, and I tell that story in my story playlist. So in 2012, I made my May 4th challenge. 2013 is the best challenge in human history. December 20, 2013 top martial arts challenge, which I eventually say it's also to prove that I'm Christ. And I raise the amount of money that I offer, if compensated, what have you, $100,000 if I'm not compensated, to be paid out over time because of this financial sabotage, and a couple $100 million if I am compensated, depending on how much I'm compensated. Okay, now it's important to note that they financially sabotaged me, according to them, to make it so it was harder. One of the reasons was to make it so it was harder for me to argue that, hey, I'm offering this much money for sure. They said, well, it's financially sabotage him. So he can't offer that 60 or 100,000 I eventually raised it to. Okay. But then I came up with, well, I'll just pay it over time, right? Maybe 10,000 a year for 10 years or whatever I got to do depending on the situation. Okay. Because it's safe to say that there's a way for me to do it that way. And in the last couple of years, they financially sabotaged me to the tune of like 80 grand, and they scrambled to make sure that I was taking massive financial losses. And this has something to do with the extreme sexual harassment that I've been enduring. And the other day, last night they put me through extreme homosexual harassment, okay, with technology and fumes and so on, and various ways of communicating to me. And during the day, yesterday, that's when these guys lost this kind of discussion in the comments on an atheist channel. He made arguments that were just very easy to counter, and he's trying to act tough. He's this black atheist with big old glasses, and they start throwing fits and so on and so forth. Anyway, so I kind of lost my train of thought here. Let's just wrap this up here. So I was covertly drugged by the government the whole time, even getting sick to my stomach. Okay, at times, back in 2014. They put a female into my life who was particularly disruptive at that time. Let's just go ahead and skip that. So the first challenger comes 2015. I beat him. 2 challengers in 2016. I beat them. Beat the several more challengers 2017. And the challengers stopped coming. And then they blind me at the end of 2017 for several days. And then I start having the eye problems. They start, I was crippled at the same time. Okay. And then since about 2018, I haven't even had a date. In 2021, I made some very key predictions that came true. I predicted no suitable helper would come. I predicted they wouldn't compensate me. I predicted that no war on poverty plan would be passing, even though it is an obvious solution to many of America's problems and it is affordable. Okay, now keep in mind that it's retarded for women to shun me, and I predicted that. It's retarded for them not to compensate me. For 10 cents each per taxpayer, that's that's $12.7 million. Okay, for $2 each per taxpayer, that's like over $250 million for $2 each. And I'm Christ. I'm the top martial artist ever possible, and it's just money that if I sued the system, they paid me. Okay, and that's like a one-time payment, right? $2 each per taxpayer, on average, progressively, need be over the course of their whole life, just one payment. You see what I'm saying? It's like fucking retarded. Oh no, we're gonna avoid compensating them instead. Now I went way over time, but I want you to understand the morals here. Okay, it is very key that I'm right, because they didn't have the highest cause. All that bullying, bitch shit, all that. Hey, let's gang up on them. Okay, it blew up in their face. My top martial arts challenge by itself, overkill, that I trampled all of them. They were doing nothing at all. They were like like a racist gay pink beaver throwing a box of Kleenex at a leopard, saying, "Oh, cry me a river." But it's like, look, I'm set apart, and I'm the leopard. I'm the falcon. Okay, you're just jealous people sabotaging me. There's nothing you can say. In virtue means man, not bitch ass saboteur military industrial complex bitch. I mean, think about it. Think.